I'm Jed Casey, technical solutions architect with Cisco, focused on the enterprise networking space. Prior to my role here at Cisco, I worked as a network engineer across many different environments, from small business to mid-sized enterprise, all the way up to global financial networks. And as Pat said, today we're going to talk about the coming together of Meraki and Catalyst, which I personally think is one of the more interesting things that Cisco is working on right now. Okay, so I'm going to very briefly go over our enterprise networking management platforms and discuss some of the benefits that cloud monitoring for Catalyst brings into the picture. I'll also cover some of the architectural use cases and positioning for cloud monitoring, followed by the step-by-step process that you can follow to get your Catalyst 9000 switches into the Meraki dashboard. Then I'll do a quick demo to show you what the Catalyst switches look like in the Meraki dashboard after they're onboarded. And then we'll have a look at what's coming ahead with wireless monitoring, along with the option of conversion to full cloud management, along with some other upcoming features. So at Cisco Live in 2022, we announced the start of our journey of bringing together different facets of Meraki and Catalyst into the same unified platform with the Meraki dashboard. The overall goal with this motion is to provide a simplified cloud-first operations for enterprise networks, whether they're Meraki-based, Catalyst-based, or a mixture of both. When Cisco initially announced cloud monitoring for Catalyst last year, prime infrastructure had not yet been announced end of life, and there was some confusion as to how DNA Center, which is now known as Catalyst Center, would fit into this picture. So Catalyst Center is absolutely not going away. And in fact, it's a major part of Cisco's network management strategy for companies that want an on-premises solution, and also for those with more advanced networking needs. For Catalyst Center, in addition to the traditional UCS server-based hardware appliances, we now also offer virtual versions for both AWS and VMware vSphere environments. And we've got additional cloud platforms like Microsoft Azure, for example, on the roadmap. And then at the other end of the spectrum, Cisco has its simplified cloud-first networking management strategy with Meraki hardware. And then, as I'll show you in this session, cloud monitoring for Catalyst sits somewhere in the middle of these two operational paradigms. So when examining which management path to go down from a deployment perspective, we have three primary areas that we're targeting. If you have a large base of pre-Catalyst 9000 devices, like the older Catalyst 2K, 3K, 4K, even there's a lot of the 6Ks that are still out there, with no plans to refresh anytime soon, or if you have a deployment that uses more complex technologies like SD access, we recommend going with Catalyst Center for management. And while this was traditionally a strictly on-premises hardware solution, we now have virtual versions that you can run either on-prem or in the cloud. And then on the other hand, if you're due for a hardware refresh and you want to adopt a cloud-first management strategy, you might consider going directly with Meraki hardware to take advantage of our large device ecosystem with simplified cloud management. And then right in the middle, which is the focus of this session, is adding your Catalyst devices into the Meraki dashboard for cloud operations. And this is perfect for when you already have the investment in Catalyst 9000 and you've decided not to adopt Catalyst Center for your management platform. And then, as I'll demonstrate later, this is also perfect for when you have a mixture of both Meraki and Catalyst devices in your network. So one of the goals with cloud monitoring for Catalyst is to project a unified view of the network, whether you're running Catalyst 9000, Meraki, or a mixture of both. By adding your Catalyst 9000 switches to the Meraki dashboard, you get many of the same benefits that native Meraki devices have with monitoring, which includes device health metrics, basic troubleshooting, like seeing port statistics, and even being able to bounce a switch port from the dashboard without needing to log into the command line to do it. And one of the biggest features of adding Catalyst to the Meraki dashboard is the ability to view network client and traffic information without requiring an additional traffic monitoring platform. And this also includes Meraki's alerting capabilities. Cloud monitoring for Catalyst, it's now included with the DNA subscription licensing. So if you have a supported Catalyst 9000 switch with an active DNA subscription, you can onboard it to the Meraki dashboard now with no additional cost. And later in this session, I'll talk about our latest Wi-Fi 6E access points, the CW9160 series, which are all designed with common hardware that can be managed either in Catalyst mode or Meraki mode. And monitoring of Catalyst devices in the Meraki dashboard, it's part of an evolution into the option for a cloud-first management platform for Catalyst hardware. Throughout this session, I'll cover many of the features that are available today, as well as a peek into what's coming ahead for Catalyst hardware within the Meraki dashboard as more features and functionality are added. With cloud monitoring for Catalyst, one of the benefits is a consolidated device inventory. So whether you have a mix of Meraki and Catalyst, or even just exclusively Catalyst, the Meraki dashboard features an easily searchable inventory of your network infrastructure devices, including serial numbers and running software versions. This centralized view of your Catalyst and Meraki devices represents a single point of contact for visualizing what's happening in your network. The Meraki dashboard is also well known for its topology view feature, which automatically draws your network topology based on discovery. And with cloud monitoring for Catalyst, this topology is further extended to include your onboarded Catalyst 9000 devices. Another benefit of bringing your Catalyst devices into the dashboard is you no longer need a separate platform for maintaining your switches. This can greatly reduce the burden on network operations teams. With cloud monitoring, you can receive dashboard alerts for switch and port-related issues, like a link or an entire switch going down. And you also get more granular details like per port packet and error counters, along with remote troubleshooting tools like pinging from the dashboard and being able to toggle switch ports without requiring CLI access, which is going to be great for troubleshooting remote branches, for example. And from an operations point of view, one of the nicest things about having your Catalyst switches monitored in the dashboard is the client tracking details. And this can save you a huge amount of time in locating a device in the network instead of manual methods. So for instance, let's say a user calls in, they need support for network issues, and you might be able to get their IP address from one system, but then maybe you have to log into like a router to figure out where in the network their subnet is located. And then you might have to log into potentially several switches in a row, looking at the MAC table of each one until you finally get down to the port that you need. When your Catalyst switches are added to the dashboard, all these details are already provided. You get the IP, the MAC, the device type, as well as traffic history. You just click on that device and the dashboard pulls up all the available information, including exactly where in the network it's connected, along with traffic usage, specific network application usage when you have DNA Advantage, and the ability to ping the device all from the dashboard. So as I said, cloud monitoring for Catalyst is now included as part of all DNA subscriptions and provides everything that we've been talking about. The DNA Advantage level lets you get deeper into those traffic analytics, which is going to save from needing to invest in a separate platform to do that. And this includes the ability to dig down to the individual client level to view and analyze network traffic usage, like applications and traffic destinations. And then as mentioned here, this also applies to our new Catalyst DNX software subscriptions. This is a new offering where the hardware and the software support are combined together into a single contract instead of separate contracts like we've done in the past.
Hey, Jed.
Uh-huh.
This is Pat. Got a question of that DNX.
Uh-huh.
To my mind, that sounds similar to sort of the Meraki subscription model, where the support and the subscription are one. Is that are we talking the same language here?
Absolutely. I think that's a fair way to look at it. I don't know that it matches one for one exactly like that, but it's certainly closer to the Meraki model than it was in the past.
Very good. Thank you.
And then another important point here is we've put processes in place so that if you need to engage tech, you'll be routed to the correct team to handle your particular issue. Traditionally, Meraki and Cisco have maintained separate teams for this, but both teams have been trained on which potential issues will pertain to them and which ones are handled by the other team. And your case will be handled by those with a proper expertise surrounding the issue. So, for instance, if you're running into an issue onboarding your Catalyst switch into the Meraki dashboard, you'd call the Meraki TAC. But if, let's say your switch is already onboarded, but it's in the Meraki dashboard, but you're running into an issue with, let's say, EIGRP routing, for example. In that case, you would call the Cisco TAC, even though the switch is onboarded to the Meraki dashboard, because that particular issue isn't going to be Meraki related. But in either case, either situation, I should say, your case will be routed to the appropriate team to best handle the issue. And then this is another good time to mention another point about cloud monitoring for Catalyst. When you onboard a switch to the Meraki dashboard for monitoring, there's new elements that get added to the switch's running configuration, which I'll show you in a minute. But it doesn't overwrite what you already have. And most important, you're not limited to the available features in Meraki when you're in monitoring mode. And EIGRP is a perfect example of this. When you onboard the switch, if it's currently running EIGRP, that configuration doesn't get touched and it continues to operate as it did before. And this is one of the most important things to realize with cloud monitoring for Catalyst. Onboarding your switches in monitoring mode is perfect for when you need more advanced networking features and protocols, but you don't want to adopt Catalyst Center. When you're in monitoring mode, you're not limited to the Meraki feature set. The dashboard merely augments your monitoring and troubleshooting operations. So now let's explore the architectures and use cases. Even though both Catalyst and Meraki can be used in nearly any type of network architecture, there's a few common use cases where cloud monitoring for Catalyst works very well. The first case is a topology where the switching portion consists of supported cloud-monitored Catalyst 9000 switches, while the wireless access points are cloud-managed. With this style of architecture, you manage the wireless access layer while still being able to keep an eye on your Catalyst switching infrastructure, all from the same dashboard. And in this example, we have supported Catalyst 9000 switches throughout the network with access points that are either Meraki MR series or the newer Wi-Fi 6E 9160 APs that are in the Meraki persona. Being able to monitor your switching infrastructure in the same location as your wireless management saves you time from having to watch and switch between multiple platforms for network operations. And continuing with the previous example, we also have options for a cloud-monitored Catalyst core with a fully cloud-managed access layer, including the access switches. And this can be achieved either through traditional Meraki switches or with converted Catalyst 9300 switches, which I'll talk about a little bit later in the session. So when both the core and the access consist of supported Catalyst 9000 switches, you can take advantage of the features within the Meraki dashboard that we discussed, like port statistics, traffic analytics, and probably most important, remote troubleshooting. And this is our primary use case with your DNA subscription if you don't intend to use Catalyst Center. And remember, this capability is now included with all DNA subscriptions for the Catalyst 9000 switches. There's no extra cost associated with it. And right now, this supports the Catalyst 9200, 9300, and 9500 series, with the monitoring of Catalyst 9800 wireless controllers coming very soon. And this kind of scenario, it's also perfect for help desk teams who don't need access to change network configurations, but they can still benefit from seeing what's going on and having some more information to triage an issue before they simply blame the network and pass the ticket on to the network team. One of the nice features of the Meraki dashboard is the ability to set up role-based access control, so you can limit who can access what. And then the other major architecture that's useful with cloud monitoring for Catalyst is the typical distributed enterprise, where the headquarters and major campuses have more complex networking requirements, but most of the individual smaller branch locations have a much simpler and more standardized deployment model. And this is somewhat similar to the first architecture, where the core parts of the network are monitored in the dashboard, and then the access layer is managed in the dashboard. And then similar to the second use case, having everything in the Meraki dashboard in this style of architecture lets your network operations teams operate on smaller budgets. So for example, one team could manage the branch access layer while still having an eye on potential issues in the core. And then a more specialized team can be responsible for managing the complexities of the larger campus networks. But in each of these common architectures, we're targeting people that are not interested in migrating to Catalyst Center, but also want to have the ability to monitor their networks from anywhere and consolidate monitoring platforms. This style of architecture also fits very well with the hybrid work scenario, where perhaps employees are assigned Meraki devices to bring home to provide secured access back to corporate resources. Having both the campus and remote devices in the same dashboard is going to save time for inventory and troubleshooting. All right, so now that we've looked at the why, let's look at the how for onboarding your Catalyst 9000 switches into the Meraki dashboard for monitoring. When you go to do this yourself, I highly recommend going through the onboarding guide in the Meraki documentation. It's not very long, and it gives you all the details you need, including caveats and things to look out for. So the process to onboard Catalyst 9000 switches, it's relatively easy. You start by making sure the switches to be onboarded have the required initial configurations and that they can reach the Meraki dashboard. You'll need the API key for your Meraki account, and the device that you're running the onboarding app from needs to have SSH reachability to the switches. And then after the app onboards the switches, the final step is to go to the Meraki dashboard and see your results. So to get into the details here, the onboarding app uses your Meraki API key instead of a username and password to interact with the Meraki dashboard. To get this API key, API access needs to be enabled for your Meraki organization, which you can toggle under the organization settings. Then you'll need to generate the API key for your user account. And this process actually just recently changed. It used to be directly under your user account settings, but now the Meraki dashboard has a dedicated API key and webhook section. And when you go to generate your API key, make sure you copy and store that key in a secure place, because on the page where you generate the key, once you navigate away from that page, that full key is never displayed again. So if you lose the key, the only thing you can do is revoke it and generate a new one. Then you'll need to download the onboarding app. This is available for Mac, Windows, and Linux. And the computer that you run the app from needs to have SSH reachability to each of the switches that are going to be onboarded. When you run the app, the very first thing you're asked for is the Meraki API key. And once again, all interactions with the Meraki dashboard will be authenticated with this key rather than using a Meraki username and password. And this is actually one of the hidden benefits of working with the Meraki dashboard. Since nearly all dashboard interactions are actually API calls, it opens the door for different kinds of future automations. Once you're authenticated with the dashboard, the app will ask you which dashboard organization you want to onboard the switches to. Now, most people are only going to have a single option here, but if you're an MSP or if you work on a very large Meraki network, you might have multiple options here. You'll need to either enter or copy and paste the IP addresses of all the switches to be onboarded. And the switches need to accept the same password, and that account needs to have privilege level 15 access. App will then verify reachability and credentials for each switch, and any issues that it comes across will be reported on this screen. And in the next stage, the app will perform a configuration pre-check against all the switches to make sure that all the requirements are met. So you need to have a supported version of iOS XE, which is version 17.3 and newer. And you'll need configurations for internet reachability from the switch. When you run the pre-check, if a requirement isn't met, the app will tell you what the issue is. So in this example, AAA wasn't enabled on the switch beforehand. Now, the app won't enable AAA for you. That's something you need to do beforehand. And as a word of caution, if those AAA commands aren't fresh in your mind, I really recommend doing this in a lab first, because it's very easy to lock yourself out of the switch if you don't configure AAA correctly. And then also regarding AAA, the app will create a local user account that's going to facilitate communications with the Meraki dashboard. So if your switch has an existing AAA configuration, note that at the moment, Radius is not supported for the authentication. You can use TACACS, but not Radius. And once the pre-checks are met, you can proceed with the app. And for each switch, you'll need to assign it to a particular Meraki network. When multiple switches are getting onboarded, you'll be able to choose the network for each one individually. And the app will let you confirm all the configuration changes to the switch before actually deploying it through SSH. So here's some of the more specific lines of configuration that get pushed to the switches before they're onboarded. As I mentioned, the Meraki user account is created, netconf is enabled, and the terminal lines used by Meraki are instantiated. Other configurations like a local loopback interface, that's going to be used as the Meraki tunnel endpoint, and other tunnel-related configurations are enabled, along with layer 2 discovery. And at the configuration confirmation screen, the app will show you exactly which configurations are going to be added to the switches. So on this screen, this shows a cleanup that's run before everything else, in case the switch has been onboarded before. netconf and LLDP are enabled, along with SSH version 2. Configurations related to tunnel connectivity to the Meraki cloud. This shows the terminal line configurations that get added, tunnel back to the Meraki cloud. And then when you're ready to proceed, the app will then connect to each of the switches over SSH and push those lines of configuration. And you'll see the status within the app as it goes through. And you can also expand each switch to get a more detailed status of the onboarding process. The final part of onboarding is connecting to the Meraki cloud and waiting for the device to be available. And this usually takes about a minute or so. The app will then confirm when the switch is fully onboarded and everything's good to go. And then after that, the switches will appear in the Meraki dashboard alongside any others that you might have. Switches onboarded to cloud monitoring for Catalyst are instantly recognizable with a gray monitor only tag next to their host name. And when the switch is onboarded, a TLS tunnel is established and maintained from the switch to the Meraki cloud. All data is encrypted in both directions, and the switch sends streaming telemetry information, including statistics delivered through Yang models, NetFlow data, syslog, SNMP. In return, Meraki sends back netconf data to the switch, which uses SSH for transport. And then like a regular Meraki switch, the onboarded Catalyst switch streams telemetry over the encrypted TLS tunnel. And also, just like a regular Meraki switch, this consumes an average of about 1K per second of outbound traffic per switch. Full traffic analytics will take up a little bit more depending on how busy the switch is, since it's based on NetFlow data. All right, so some of the limitations to be aware of before onboarding your Catalyst 9000 switches are that at the moment, you can't have a switch both managed by Catalyst Center and onboarded to the Meraki dashboard at the same time. But support for this is on the long-term roadmap for capabilities. If you try to do it now, it may or may not work for you, but Cisco won't be able to support you with it. Man-in-the-middle proxies are not supported. Each switch needs to have direct connectivity to the Meraki cloud, but we do publish the information that you need to allow the communications through your firewalls. And if the switch has an existing NetFlow configuration, that will need to be removed before onboarding. New NetFlow configurations are added as part of the onboarding, but it will skip over that part if the switch has an existing NetFlow configuration. And that will prevent traffic data from appearing in the Meraki dashboard. And then, as noted before, the DNA Essentials license will give you basic traffic data but the advantage level will give you deeper application level details. But do note that the 9500 series switches don't support this capability, regardless of license. And the best practice is to gather this kind of data from the distribution and access layers downstream through either Meraki MS switches or onboarded Catalyst 92 or 9300 series switches. The 9500 will give you a traffic overview, but it won't let you dig deeper into individual clients. All right, so if you run into issues during the onboarding process, the app is usually pretty good about revealing what the problem is when it does the pre-check. Some of the important points are that the switch needs to be able to reach the Meraki cloud through a front panel port in the default VRF. So that's why the management port on the back won't work for this. You need NTP and a default route plus DNS, along with a couple open terminal lines, local user and AAA, as I mentioned before. And to verify switch to cloud reachability, from the switch, you can telnet to one of the Meraki TLS gateways on port 443. A straight ping won't work. It won't respond to that. But if you follow the telnet to 443 process, that will test the reachability.
Hey, Jed, I just want to let folks know, in case some folks join later, if you have any, everyone is muted. If you have any questions, you can raise your hand and we'll unmute you, or feel free to put your question in the chat window. Thanks a lot.
Very good. All right, a couple other things to note. Connectivity to the Meraki dashboard is based on routing through the new tunnel that it creates. And that's why the IP default gateway command won't work. You need to have full IP routing enabled. And then also, as I mentioned, your switch can use TACACS for authentication, but Radius is not supported at this time, but it is on the roadmap for support. And then, of course, you need to have an active DNA subscription to be eligible for cloud monitoring for Catalyst. And one other thing to check, if you're not receiving any client data in the dashboard from the switches, and you've checked everything else, like the NetFlow configuration, make sure you have the data collection enabled within the Meraki dashboard. And this is toggled under the network-wide general settings in the traffic analysis section. All right, and with that, let me show you a quick demo of what the Catalyst 9000 switches look like in the Meraki dashboard after they've been onboarded. We have a public demo available that anyone can log into to get some hands-on experience with the Meraki dashboard. Right now, this demo has it features some of our newer convertible Wi-Fi 6E access points, as well as Catalyst 9300 series switches, both in monitored and fully managed mode. Switch over to the demo here. Second. Okay, so first thing here is Meraki's in the process of introducing this new organization summary page. So let me preface with, this isn't meant to be a deep dive into the whole Meraki dashboard, but I thought this was an important enough overview to share. One of the major benefits of adding your Catalyst switches into the Meraki dashboard, if you're not already familiar with Meraki, you get this nice dashboard overview. It gives you the instant state of the network. So, like, for instance, here we can see that of the 31 uplinks available across the entire network, one of them is having an issue. And if you click on it, it'll tell you right away it's the Toronto network, and this cellular link is having trouble connecting. So that's kind of a nice, quick overview. All right, so when you go to do the onboarding for the Catalyst switches, the first thing you have to do is make sure that API access is enabled. And you do that under the organization and the general settings here. And once that comes up, it's towards the very bottom. You go to this dashboard API access section, make sure that check mark is enabled. And once it is, then you can go into the API and webhooks section to enable your key. And once again, when you go to make that key or generate the key, make sure you copy that, because once you're off that screen, it's never shown again. All right, so I'm going to switch here to the South America Data Center Network, because this one in particular is good for demoing this. So under the switches here, these are the switches that are onboarded into this particular network. We've got a range of monitored and a fully migrated Catalyst 9300 switch. All right, so the first thing I wanted to show you was this view here is where the inventory aspect comes into play. You can search for any of these fields that are here. You get the serial numbers for each of the switches, IP information, model number, and firmware versions. And you'll see here that Catalyst 9000 switches that are onboarded for monitoring will show the iOS XE version. And then this switch here, this is the 9300 that's been converted to full Meraki management mode. That's going to show you the Meraki firmware version that's running on that switch. So one of the big advantages of the Meraki dashboard is under each network, there's the topology view. This is going to draw all of the infrastructure devices in the network, and it'll start with the router, the MX appliance at the top. And as it goes further down the tree, we get closer out to the access where we've got the APs out here. We've got the, like here's a traditional Meraki MR series AP. And here's one of the 9160 APs, the Wi-Fi 6E that's in Meraki mode. But here in the middle, we've got all of these onboarded Catalyst switches. And right here at the top, we can see here's a stacked 9500, well, two 9500s. And in the dashboard, it shows you a representation of that stack with multiple switches being displayed. And you can see right away here, it's one of the two members there is yellow. So if you hover over this, it's indicating that something's wrong. It'll show you what's going on right now. And then this is another big advantage of the Meraki dashboard is that in addition to telling you what's wrong, it's going to give you some ideas on how you might be able to resolve that issue. So that's very handy. All right, so now let's go into one of these switches. All right, so if you're not familiar with the Meraki dashboard, once the switch is on board, it looks very much like a regular Meraki switch. So over here in the port view, it shows you the stack ports. This switch has a network module installed, so it displays that. And with Meraki switching, if it can detect which port the uplink is on, it will show you this little up arrow here. Any ports that are providing power, it's going to have the little lightning bolt symbol. And so off here to the left, we got your host name, model number, any tags. This is kind of cool. You can add all your Meraki devices to a map. You just put in the address and it'll pull it up. You get your regular IP information. And then here's an important thing to mention too. When you onboard a Catalyst 9000 switch, the dashboard is going to show you both the Catalyst and Meraki serial numbers. So what happens is when you onboard a switch for the first time, it's going to take this Catalyst serial number and it's going to use it to generate a corresponding Meraki serial number. And that serial number actually then stays with the switch forever. So if you take the switch out of the dashboard and then put it back in later, it's going to get that exact same serial number. You can add tags and notes. And here's another link to the topology view. When you access it through here, it's going to highlight this switch in particular. Let's see what else we got here. You get the historical usage data, including connectivity. You can go from 2 hours up to 1 month. So that's going to be useful to show you different kinds of trends. You get the overall traffic information. If there's any client devices that it can detect, it'll show it here in the overview. And then you can go, see, before we get to the individual ports, let me show you this ports tab. This gives you a table overview of what's going on, all different kinds of information through here. And in the location tab, this is where you can access the map view. And then this is one thing I like in particular with Meraki is that it has a built-in spot to attach a photo of the device. So This in particular is going to be great for large distributed networks. Think, for instance, like retail, where maybe you've got hundreds or thousands of locations out there, and if you or somebody on your team needs to help somebody non-technical, say they need to plug something into the switch, having the photo here can help visualize what's going on and make it a little bit easier to help describe to that non-technical person what's going on. And then in the tools section, this is where you can ping from the dashboard. There's a terminal option coming up, which I'll discuss that a little bit later. Through here, you can bounce individual or multiple ports all at the same time if you need to. And then you get the MAC forwarding table. So one use for this in troubleshooting is, let's say a device isn't getting an IP address. You can use this to find out if it's at least if the switch is at least registering the MAC address. Is it getting layer 2 connectivity? So if you see a MAC address but no IP address, maybe there's DHCP issues going on. All right, back in the summer view, I'm going to click on this individual port here, this 13. So when you click on the port, you'll get the traffic data for this individual port. You'll get an overview of the configuration. So in this case, it's a trunk port, and it's going to show you which VLANs are allowed on this port. You get the connectivity history for this individual port, traffic usage, and it also displays the live traffic. I believe this is pulled every 10 seconds or so. If there's any CDP or LLDP neighbors, that's going to show. And here's shows you the exact PoE usage. So the AP that's connected to this requested 14 watts, and it's currently only using a little bit over 4 watts. If there's any clients, it'll show you that. Here's where you can bounce this individual port. This in particular is great. Let's say if you need to reset an AP or a camera, something like that, you can do that through here without needing to log into the command line to do that. And then the packet counters, in particular, this is going to be great for, let's say somebody calls in, they're having an issue, the network's not completely down, but it's not performing like it's supposed to. One of the things you could check is come in here, and if you're seeing a lot of CRC errors, that's probably going to mean a bad cable or a bad connector or something like that. So that's another tool that you have for troubleshooting. Okay, now there's one more client I want to show you. I'm going to switch over to the San Francisco network. And in the switches here, there's one client in particular on this third switch.
Hey, Jed.
Yep.
Just a minor thing, but it just I don't know why it just occurred to me is that, when we're working with problems in a Cisco Catalyst environment, and we're off-site. Mm-hmm. We typically have to VPN in to get into those gear to look at the CLI.
Excellent.
Beauty of this is that you're sitting in my hotel room, as long as I have access to the internet, I can get in and have the ability to do some basic troubleshooting without having to take that extra step.
Absolutely. And there isn't really a way for me to demonstrate this here, but Meraki also has an app for phones and tablets where you get sort of a simplified version of this web interface, but right on the phone. You can toggle ports, you can see what's going on through the app, and this also includes the onboarded Catalyst switches. All right, so with this here, this is going to demonstrate the DNA advantage. So this view, it looks similar to the last port we viewed, except there's no PoE. But if you go into the client view, this is where it's going to show you more information about this individual client, including where in the network it's connected. And then when you have DNA advantage, you're going to get this pie chart that's going to show you all the details of individual traffic flows. If you click on the show details, it's going to show you exactly what's going on for the traffic. And again, you can adjust this for different periods of time. And then as an added bonus, if you have the Meraki Systems Manager installed on that client, you're going to get even deeper details, like the software that's installed on there, for instance. And Pat, that was an excellent point about once it's onboarded to the dashboard, you don't need VPN access anymore to get into that. Okay. Oh, and I highly encourage, if you're not familiar with the Meraki dashboard, I highly encourage you going to this demo link, which I'll post in the chat at the end here. It's free to do, and anybody can go in and you can sort of play around with this stuff.
And by the way, folks, Jed has given me a PDF version of his slide deck, and so he said I can forward to any of you. So if you're interested in that, please drop me an email.
Yep. If nothing else, the deck itself is good for reference because some of these screens I cover pretty quick. Some of them are kind of dry by nature, but having that deck as a reference, you can go through. It'll help you out when you're onboarding the switches. All right. So now let's switch gears to wireless. In 2022, we announced the new wireless access points in our Wi-Fi 6E line that have converged hardware. So the very same hardware can run either in Catalyst management mode or Meraki management mode. And once you have the APs installed, if your method of managing the infrastructure changes down the road, you don't have to reinvest in all new hardware, as these APs can also be converted into the other management mode. The 9160 line, it represents our low to medium range of Wi-Fi 6E APs. All of the models are capable of utilizing the full Wi-Fi 6E spectrum, and they also include separate dedicated scanning and Bluetooth radios. All models also have N-gig ports, and the 9166 can use up to 5 gigs of uplink capacity. And then the 9166 also has a switchable radio that can operate either in 5 gig or 6 gig mode. And this is going to be great for, if you're still transitioning to the 6 gig spectrum, you can take advantage of the extra capacity of having a second radio operating in the 5 gig band today. And then over time, as more 6 gig clients get onboarded, you'll be able to switch that radio over to that mode and be able to take advantage of that extra spectrum. And many of the newest phones, tablets, and laptops are now starting to come out with Wi-Fi 6E capabilities and can operate in that 6 gigahertz spectrum. And also note, we recently introduced the 9166D model, which features an internal directional antenna. And that's, of course, going to be ideal when you need a more focused coverage pattern, like in hallways or corridors, for example. And this model is identical. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Question?
What I was going to mention about that 9166D is that particular access point is especially important when you want to move to 6 gigahertz. Okay, with 6 gigahertz, the only APs that are allowed are what are called low power APs, which means that the antenna has to be integrated into the AP. Well, that typically means that it's an omni antenna. And if you want to do directional type of antenna, it tends to be an antenna that's added externally. You cannot do that with a low power AP with 6 gigahertz. This AP has a built-in directional antenna, so it can run at 6 gigahertz, but yet act in a directional fashion, such as big warehouse going down a hall or something like that. Just want to add that in there.
Yeah, very good. Yep, just like you said, it's exactly like the regular 9166, but it has that directional antenna instead. And it's also important to note, and I've been asked this a few times from different people, our current Wi-Fi 6 APs, they're not going end of sale anytime soon. And on this slide, we can see what the direct replacements are compared to the Wi-Fi 6 to the new Wi-Fi 6E. But the Wi-Fi 6, they'll continue to operate within their respective management platforms, either Meraki or Catalyst. But also note that our current flagship Wi-Fi 6E APs, the Meraki MR57 and Catalyst 9136, these were developed before we started our hardware convergence. So these ones will also not be convertible between management modes. And then adding further to Pat's point, just last month, we introduced the latest in the 9160, which is the 9163E. This is an outdoor version of the 9162. It's very similar in that it has a 2x2 radio for each band, but it has different external antenna options available. And most important, this AP has a built-in GPS for automatic frequency control, which Pat was talking about the low power. Having the automatic frequency control, that's going to enable standard power levels in the 6 gig band. And this is also available now it's available right now for the Meraki management mode. And it's expected within the next couple of weeks, actually, for the Catalyst management mode. And then just like all APs in the 9160 line, you can convert the management mode later if you need to. As you just saw, when we introduced our Wi-Fi 6 line a few years ago, convergence had not yet started, and the Meraki and Catalyst product lines were still completely separate. With Wi-Fi 6E and our 9160 line, we took the first steps of product convergence. So while the underlying hardware is identical, we still have separate SKUs and lead times. And even though this is becoming less of an issue, when supply chain times were at their worst last year, I'm sure many of you were affected by this difference in ordering models. Now, with our next generation of wireless access points, once Wi-Fi 7 is available, we will complete the convergence of the two product lines and have a single SKU with common hardware, the ability to change management modes, and a better overall experience for ordering and lead times. So now I'd like to show you a preview of what's coming next for cloud monitoring for Catalyst. At Cisco Live this year, we announced that we'll soon have the ability to monitor wireless deployments based on Catalyst 9800 controllers in the Meraki dashboard. We're going to have a public beta of this capability early next year, and we're targeting general availability in the summer of 2024. So this initial release will support monitoring of hardware 9800 controllers with our Wave 2 and newer access points. So that's going to be the 2800, 3800, 4800 series, the Wi-Fi 6 9100s, and then the new 9160 APs in Catalyst mode. So this release will also include some enhancements to iOS XE so that the 9800 controller can be onboarded directly to the Meraki dashboard through the command line with a single command, instead of requiring the onboarding app like we do now with the switches. Once it's onboarded, you'll be able to monitor the 9800 controller and individual APs, and you'll get the controller and AP status. You'll get that extended topology view, client and application visibility, and then some of the regular Meraki Live traffic and troubleshooting and health features. And then in the second half of 2024, we're going to introduce additional features like deeper health and troubleshooting tools, image upgrades, configuration backup, and integrating our suite of RF and radio resource management features to improve wireless performance. And then we also have on the roadmap to support virtual 9800 CL deployments. But for this initial launch, only hardware 9800 controllers will be supported. And unfortunately, I don't have a demo environment yet that I can show this off, but I do have a few screenshots of the work in progress. Just like with the Catalyst 9000 switches, the APs and controllers will show the gray monitor only tag along with their current functional state. You'll see information about the APs themselves and the controller they're connected to. And then just like with a traditional Meraki AP, you'll see client data and channel utilization. So in this screenshot here, it's got a 9166 that's in Catalyst mode, which has 3 client-serving radios. The statistics and utilization for all 3 radios are displayed on the dashboard. And then likewise, this further supports migration away from prime infrastructure. You can upload floor maps into the Meraki dashboard and place your monitored Catalyst APs within that diagram. The APs and controllers, they're shown separately in the dashboard, and you'll get a front panel view of the controller, just like you do with Catalyst 9000 switches. The basic controller configuration elements like the layer 2 and layer 3 interfaces, along with configured VLANs, are also shown in the dashboard. And then also, just like the onboarded switches, you'll be able to receive logs and alerts as they occur. And one of the nicer things about the Meraki dashboard is how easy it is to gauge the overall wireless health of your network and how quick it is to dig deeper into the details when you need to. This is an operationally simplified model, and it makes our platform more accessible to lower levels of support teams, especially regarding the monitoring aspects of the dashboard. So as I mentioned, the cloud monitoring for Catalyst Wireless will be in public beta in early 2024, and it's expected to be generally available in the summer. Licensing will also follow the same model as cloud monitoring for Catalyst switching, where access to the Meraki dashboard for monitoring is granted automatically with your DNA subscription at no additional cost. And then the advantage level will give you deeper details into client traffic analytics. And then once again, just like with Catalyst switching, we're positioning the overall cloud monitoring for Catalyst option for when you have the investment in Catalyst hardware, but you don't want to migrate to Catalyst Center. This provides you a cloud-based monitoring solution that's included with your DNA subscription at no extra cost. All right, so at Cisco Live in 2022, we announced the long-term plan of the ability to convert Catalyst switches into a full Meraki cloud management mode. And today, we're one step closer with this, with the ability to convert specific model Catalyst 9300 switches. This is currently in public beta, and anyone can convert their management mode. When a 9300 is converted to Meraki cloud management mode, it effectively becomes a Meraki MS390. It will behave identically, and it'll have the exact same feature set as the MS390. So after conversion, the switch will run Meraki code, and it must be managed exclusively through the dashboard at that point, just like a regular Meraki switch. So once it's converted, there's no access to the console port or command line. During the public beta, licensing is not enforced. And then when we get closer to an official launch date, we will publish the details on this, but the licensing will be very similar to the 9160 APs, where when the device is converted to Meraki management mode, you'll need a Meraki license, not a DNA license. And then likewise, there will be a licensing conversion process that's similar to what we do now with the 9160 APs when you change management modes. When you convert, let's see. So converting your eligible switches to Meraki management mode, this is a good way to have a cloud-first management strategy without needing to invest in new hardware when your networking needs fall within the supported Meraki feature set. And we also recently introduced additional fiber-based 9300 models that are eligible for conversion to Meraki management, and this includes models in the 9300X series. And then continuing with this progression, we also very recently introduced the Catalyst 9300M product SKUs. These are our regular supported Catalyst 9300 switches, but orderable with the Meraki management mode pre-installed. Just like how you can order our 9160 series APs with Meraki mode instead of Catalyst mode. And this is going to save you the step of manual conversion, and it's perfect for when you need the hardware features that are available in the 9300 line, like 60 watt UPoE, faster uplinks, and more expansive mGig ports. But you also want to take a cloud-first network management strategy when your technical needs fall within the Meraki feature set. And then to further support the ability to choose management modes, as of version 16 of the Meraki switching code, we've split into two parallel development trains. The MS train will continue to support the traditional Meraki MS switches, except for the MS390. And then the new CS train will support Catalyst switches and includes the MS390. So these parallel code trains, it's going to enhance agility and code quality, since any kinds of code issues in one train won't necessarily hold up the other train while they're being resolved. And then finally, as we showed at Cisco Live this year, we're continuing on our journey to give you a choice in how you want to monitor and manage your networks. This is going to include the eventual release of new switches that follow the same model as our 9160 APs, where with the same common hardware, you can order it either in Catalyst or Meraki management mode, and then change modes later if the business needs require it. Over time, you can expect to see further convergence of both hardware and software platforms, including similar product SKUs, ordering processes, and perhaps most important, same product lead times. So before I wrap up here, I want to show you a couple of things that are coming to cloud monitoring for Catalyst and mention some of the long-term roadmap items. So I don't have any dates to share with any of these items, but I could show you a preview of some of them. In the near term, we'll be adding support for the 9500X series switches. We'll also add support for alerts through email and webhooks, a troubleshooting console, packet captures, image upgrades, and configuration backups. All these together are going to further support migration from prime infrastructure and make cloud monitoring for Catalyst even more useful for regular network operations. In the longer term, we're working on supporting onboarding switches through the command line, just like what we're going to be doing with the 9800 controllers, and no longer require the onboarding app. And then further out, we also intend to support the chassis-based 9400 and 9600 switches in the dashboard for monitoring, along with Catalyst Center coexistence, so that you can manage your switches with Catalyst Center, but still have them in the Meraki dashboard for monitoring and have it officially supported. Support for the 9400 and 9600 in particular, it's taken a little bit longer to develop because prior to this motion, there were no traditional Meraki switches in a chassis configuration. So some of those constructs are still being developed in the back-end systems. One of the new features that's actually available now with the early access program is packet captures for cloud monitored switches. So as you may know, the commands for initiating a packet capture on a Catalyst switch can be pretty detailed and intimidating if you're not familiar with them. And the figure on the left shows an example of this. So by adding this capability to the Meraki dashboard, we're dramatically simplifying the process and making gathering packet captures a lot easier and more accessible, while still having the ability to create very specific filters when you need to. This capability is going to be great for lower tiers of help desk and network operations teams for troubleshooting. We'll also be adding the ability to manage switch firmware versions from the dashboard. Within the dashboard, we will have curated versions of the iOS XE code available to upgrade to. And this is going to be the major long-term releases of code. So think 17.6, 17.9, 17.12. You'll be able to schedule upgrade times and create custom upgrade groups. And as part of the upgrade process, different validation checks will be run, and the XE images themselves will be delivered to the switches through the established secure Meraki tunnel. The configuration archive feature will keep the past several versions of the running config for each device, along with the ability to perform a diff between any two versions. And you'll also have the ability to download the configurations in case you need to restore them to the switch. The product team is looking into the possibility of restoring configurations through the dashboard, but they haven't committed anything to that just yet. Event logging, this is another feature that's available now with early access. This can either supplement or even completely replace your own syslog server, and the switch syslog events will be centrally collected on the Meraki dashboard. So with this feature, you can use the dashboard to search for events, as well as download the results for further analysis. And I also wanted to give you a preview of what the process will be for native dashboard onboarding once it's available. As I mentioned, this will be available for cloud monitoring for 9800 wireless controllers first, but it will be rolled out to the Catalyst 9000 switches as well. So you'll run a single command, service Meraki Connect, which will have the device contact the dashboard, and then you'll be able to claim the device just like you do now with traditional Meraki hardware. After the device is claimed and added to a Meraki network, the configuration for monitoring will be pushed to that device, just like how it's done now with Meraki hardware, and you won't need the onboarding app anymore. And there's also going to be a couple of show commands that you can use to view the status of the process. And then finally, we have the troubleshooting console, which is due for release very soon and provides a read-only console session to the switch right through the dashboard. This once again fits into what Pat was mentioning with the VPN, where with this ability, you'll be able to get to the command line without needing a separate VPN session. And this will let you issue show commands to the switch right through the dashboard.
That's very
it's
nice.
Going to be it's going to be very useful for when you need to gather specific information that's not present in the dashboard or do deeper levels of troubleshooting. So in this capacity, the Meraki dashboard acts as a proxy between your input and the switch's output, and that's going to prevent incorrect or unacceptable commands from being passed to the switch. Now, one of the goals with this capability is to save time in troubleshooting instead of having to have a separate method for consoling into the switch. The show commands are run in privileged mode as the built-in Meraki user that was created when the switch was onboarded. Now, one common use case for this is to gather information for that's not present in the dashboard. A good example is routing protocols, for instance. And the product team is looking into the ability to do a full console session where you can enter configuration mode as well, but they haven't published any timelines on that as of yet.